The sea is black tonight, flat and silent, like it is holding its breath. A sharp metallic scream tears through the hull. Not loud at first. Deep, violent, personal. The deck jumps underfoot as if the ship itself has been punched in the gut. Men stumble. A wrench clatters across steel. Somewhere below, water begins to rush in with a sound that no sailor ever forgets. The sound of the ocean finding a way inside. Red lights flicker on. Emergency power. The air smells of burnt insulation and diesel fuel, thick and bitter in the throat. Someone shouts for a damage report. Someone else is already coughing, soaked, scrambling in the dark. The ship lists to port. Slowly, deliberately, like a wounded animal trying to stay on its feet. Radar still spins. Engines still answer. And the order comes anyway. Hold your station. No one asks why. Out there, beyond the darkness, are transports packed with men. Thousands of them, sleeping, waiting, trusting, and between them, and whatever just fired that torpedo, there is only this destroyer. Steel groans, rivets protest. The ocean presses harder now, cold fingers clawing at the wound. This is not the moment of panic. This is the moment of decision. And the men aboard USS Blue stay where they are. USS Blue was never meant to be remembered. She was a Fletcher-class destroyer, long, lean, built for speed and sacrifice. Sailors called ships like her tin cans, thin-skinned escorts designed to stand between the fleet and death. She carried 5 5-inch guns, torpedo tubes along her centerline, depth charges stacked like silent promises at the stern. Her job was simple: screen the fleet, find the threat, die first, if necessary. Life aboard her was steel and routine. The deck plates vibrated constantly, a low mechanical hum that never quite left your bones. At night, the Pacific air clung damp and warm, mixing with the smell of oil, sweat, and cordite residue baked into the ship's skin. Men slept wherever they could, on ammo lockers, against bulkheads, helmets used as pillows, letters from home folded and unfolded until the creases softened like cloth. Coffee was thin, jokes were darker. Everyone learned to read the mood of the sea by sound alone, the slap of waves against the bow, the hiss of water racing past the hull. On watch, you stared into nothingness, just black water and darker sky, fingers resting near triggers, ears tuned for sonar pings or the shout that would change everything. They knew the math. If a submarine fired at the big ships, a destroyer had seconds to react. If it fired at them instead, there would be no one else in the way. That was the bargain. No speeches were made about it, no medals promised, just duty, passed quietly from one watch to the next. Protect the others. Hold the line. Stay sharp. By October of 1944, the war had carried USS Blue across thousands of miles of ocean. She had escorted carriers, guarded convoys, hunted shadows beneath the waves. She had done her job so well that most men aboard believed she always would. Now she was entering Leyte Gulf. The largest amphibious invasion in the Pacific was unfolding around her. Transports filled the horizon. Landing craft moved like insects toward distant beaches. Somewhere inland, artillery thundered faintly through the night. And beneath the surface, unseen, patient, something waited. USS Blue took her place on the perimeter. Engines steady, sonar active, guns trained outward into the dark. A small ship, a necessary one. And when the ocean finally reached out for her, she did not step aside. Leyte Gulf was too calm. That was the first thing the watch officers noticed. No wind worth naming, no heavy swell, just a wide, dark plain of water stretching out under a moonless sky. Calm seas made for good landings and perfect hunting. USS Blue moved slowly along her assigned sector, engines turning at a measured pace, not fast enough to throw a wake that could be seen from miles away, not slow enough to lose maneuverability if the call came. Below decks, sonar operators leaned in toward their headphones. The soft, rhythmic ping echoed through the compartment, each return a ghostly suggestion of distance and shape. Most contacts were nothing. Thermal layers, schools of fish, false hopes and false alarms. But every ping tightened the chest just a little more. The invasion fleet lay behind them like a floating city. Transports rode heavy and low in the water, loaded with men, vehicles, ammunition. Entire futures packed into steel hulls. Those ships could not dodge, could not run. If a submarine slipped through, the results would be catastrophic. So the destroyers stayed out front. On the bridge, eyes strained against the dark. The horizon dissolved into black on black. Somewhere far off, faint flashes marked naval gunfire in support of the landings. Each distant boom arrived seconds later, a dull reminder that the war was already claiming lives ashore. A message crackled in over the radio. Submarine activity reported in the area. No confirmed contact, no precise bearing, just enough to keep everyone awake. Depth charge crews stood by at the stern. Their weapons sat in racks like blunt iron barrels, each one capable of tearing the sea open. Gunners checked their mounts again and again, hands moving from habit rather than need. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. The sea gave no warning. No periscope broke the surface. No white trail betrayed a torpedo's path. Just silence. And then the sudden realization that the ocean beneath them was no longer empty. The first impact came without sound. At least, not at first. Then the hull rang like a struck bell. Steel screamed. Lights went out. Men were thrown against bulkheads as the ship shuddered violently to port. Somewhere forward, compartments vanished in a rush of water and pressure. Alarms began to howl. Damage control parties were already moving before the echo faded. Hatches slammed shut. Wounded men were dragged clear. Pumps came online, fighting an enemy that never tired and never retreated. On the bridge, the order to withdraw hovered unspoken, but the screen could not break. Behind USS Blue, the fleet slept, and somewhere beneath the calm surface of Leyte Gulf, the unseen hunter circled, patient enough to strike again. The deck was no longer steady. USS Blue leaned to port, not enough to throw men overboard, but enough that every step had to be measured. Water was already flooding compartments forward, cold and fast, forcing its way through ruptured seams and twisted steel. Below the waterline, the first torpedo had done its work. The explosion had torn into the hull like a fist through thin tin. Frames buckled, pipes ruptured, electrical cables snapped and spat sparks before dying into darkness. In some spaces, the lights never came back on. Men worked by feel. Hands slid along bulkheads, slick with condensation and seawater. Boots splashed through rising pools as damage control teams dragged hoses into position. Orders were shouted, repeated, swallowed by the roar of pumps and the grinding protest of stressed metal. The smell was everywhere now. Fuel oil leaking into seawater, burnt insulation, hot steel cooling too fast. Every breath tasted wrong. Someone yelled that the forward magazine was secure. Someone else reported steering control still responding. The engines, somehow, were still turning. That mattered. As long as the screws were spinning, USS Blue could maneuver. She could keep her bow pointed toward the threat. She could stay in the fight. On the bridge, faces were tight and pale under red emergency lights. Charts were spread out but barely glanced at. This was no longer about navigation. This was about seconds and angles and survival. Sonar came alive with frantic calls. Possible contact, uncertain bearing, lost again in the clutter of echoes and noise. The ocean was thick with sound now, distorted by the explosion, by cavitation, by fear. The submarine had fired once and missed its chance to kill outright. That made it more dangerous. Depth-charge crews stood ready at the stern, hands resting on release levers. They waited for a clean contact that never quite came. Drop too early, and the enemy would slip away. Wait too long, and the next torpedo would find its mark. Another report came up from below. Flooding contained, for now, casualties being treated. The list was holding. The ship was hurt, badly, but she was still afloat, and still between the enemy and the fleet. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood the truth settling in like cold rain. The submarine would not stop at one shot. Somewhere in the dark water off the beam, a second torpedo was already being prepared, its crew listening, waiting for the right moment to finish the job. USS Blue did not run. She slowed, turned slightly, held her place, because if the next torpedo came, better it came for her. The order never came to abandon station. It hung in the air, heavy and unspoken, as USS Blue fought to steady herself. Damage control reports filtered up in fragments. Flooding was spreading, but slowly. Pumps were buying time, bulkheads held, barely. Time was the only currency left. The destroyer adjusted course, a careful turn to starboard, presenting her narrowest profile to the unseen enemy. Engines answered sluggishly, the vibration through the deck uneven now, like a wounded heartbeat. Every man aboard understood what staying meant. The submarine was still out there. The first torpedo had proven that, and a destroyer, damaged and slower than before, was no longer a hunter. She was bait. But behind them, nothing moved. The transports remained dark and quiet, their crews unaware of how close the danger had come. Landing craft bobbed gently, their hulls knocking softly together. Thousands of lives rested on the thin strip of water USS Blue still controlled. Sonar strained for a return. The ping echoed, came back warped, uncertain, a possible contact. Then nothing. The sea refused to give up its secrets. At the stern, depth-charge crews waited in silence. No one spoke unless spoken to. Helmets were strapped tight. Hands were steady, even as the ship's list forced them to brace against the rails. A corpsman passed through the passageway carrying bandages darkened with oil and blood. He did not hurry. Panic wasted energy. There would be time for that later, if there was a later. On the bridge, the captain watched the black water ahead, jaw clenched, eyes fixed. He knew what the charts said. He knew the odds. He also knew that turning away would open a gap the submarine needed only once. So USS Blue held her line. Steel groaned as the hull flexed against pressure it was never meant to endure. Somewhere forward, a man tightened a shoring beam with numb fingers. Somewhere aft, another checked a valve, already checked twice before. The ship was alive with quiet motion, disciplined, controlled. Then sonar broke the silence. Contact, clearer this time, off the port quarter, closing. No time for depth charges, no clean firing solution, only seconds to react. The sea around the destroyer remained calm, deceptively calm, and beneath it, the final decision had already been made. There was no warning shout this time, no shouted bearing, no frantic countdown, just a sudden violent impact aft, deeper, heavier, final. The second torpedo struck near the stern, tearing through steel that had already been weakened by strain and fatigue. The blast lifted the deck, then dropped it back down wrong, misaligned, broken. The screws shuddered once, twice, and then fell silent. Power failed completely. The lights went out for good. Darkness swallowed the ship, broken only by flashlights and the dim red glow of battle lanterns swinging wildly as the list increased. Water surged in from the rear now, cold and unstoppable, flooding compartments faster than pumps could answer. The ship began to die. Orders cut through the chaos, calm and precise. Secure the engines, set boundaries, prepare to abandon ship. No one argued. Damage control teams fought until the water reached their chests, then backed away only when ordered. Gunners left their mounts reluctantly, patting the warm steel one last time before moving aft. Wounded men were passed hand to hand, lowered carefully toward the rails. The sea was waiting. Life rafts were cut loose. Floats hit the water with hollow splashes. Men climbed down cargo nets and lines, boots slipping on oil-slick steel. Some paused at the rail, looking back, memorizing the shape of the ship that had been their world. She was listing heavily now, the stern already low, the bow rising like a question that would never be answered. Still, there was no panic. No screaming, just voices calling out names, counting heads, making sure no one was left behind. The destroyer had done her job. She had taken both torpedoes meant for someone else, and now there was nothing more to give. The sea closed in with surprising gentleness. USS Blue slipped beneath the surface stern first, her bow hanging in the air for a moment longer, silhouetted against the dark sky. Water rushed across the deck, swallowing gun mounts, lifelines, memories. Then the bow dipped. The ocean claimed her. The sound was not an explosion, not a roar, just a deep, rolling hush. As steel met depth and pressure took over. Men in the water watched in silence, clinging to rafts and debris. Faces lit by starlight and the faint glow of distant ships that still floated, still lived. The place where the destroyer had been was now only ripples spreading outward, already fading. Oil slicked the surface, reflecting the stars in broken patterns. The water was cold enough to bite, but not enough to numb. Not yet. Someone removed his helmet and held it against his chest. Someone whispered a prayer. Below them, the ship settled into the dark, her hull creaking one last time as she came to rest. No flags, no markers, just steel and duty lying quietly on the ocean floor. When rescue craft arrived, they found survivors who did not cheer. They spoke softly. They looked back often. USS Blue had not been the largest ship in Leyte Gulf. She had not fired the biggest guns. She had not decided the battle. But when the moment came, she stayed. And because she stayed, others lived. The sea rolled on, indifferent, eternal. And somewhere beneath it, a tin can named Duty remained at her last station.